My best friend told my husband I'd been sleeping with her boyfriend for months. She showed him screenshots. She had timestamps. She even had a voice memo she claimed was me laughing about it on the phone with her. My husband didn't ask me a single question. He just looked at me across our kitchen and said, "I want you out by morning." I left. I didn't fight, didn't explain. I took my coat off the hook by the door, walked to my car in the January cold, and drove north until the highway ran out of lights. 3 years later, he found me. He was standing outside my office building in downtown Sudbury on a Wednesday afternoon in March, his collar turned up against the wind off the lake, looking like someone had spent 3 years slowly erasing him. He saw me before I saw him, and then he saw what was beside me. My daughter looked up at him with eyes that were his exact color, that particular shade of gray-green that I'd fallen in love with before I knew what loving someone actually cost. He said my name, just my name, nothing else. I took my daughter's hand, walked past him to my car, buckled her in, and pulled out of the lot without looking in the rearview mirror. That night, after she was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold and thought about the morning 3 years ago when everything I thought I had turned out to be made of paper. My name is Nora. I was 31 when my life burned down. I was 34 when I finally understood that I'd built something better from the ashes. This is what actually happened. My husband and I had been together for 6 years, married for 2 of them. We lived in a semi-detached in the west end of Ottawa, the kind of neighborhood where people leave community garden plots and wave from driveways. He worked in federal policy. I managed communications for a mid-sized tech firm. We had a good life, not perfect but real. My best friend Simone had been in my life since our second year at Carleton, 13 years. She was maid of honor at our wedding. She had a key to our house. When I had a miscarriage in our first year of marriage, the kind of loss you don't fully know how to hold, it was Simone who sat with me on the bathroom floor and didn't try to fix it with words. Her boyfriend at the time was a man named Damien. He'd come into her life about a year before everything fell apart. I didn't particularly like him, and I was careful about how I said so. He had a way of making himself the center of every room he walked into. What I didn't know was that Damien had asked me out twice before he started dating Simone. Both times I'd been politely clear that I wasn't interested, that I was happily married, and both times I'd thought nothing more of it. I didn't understand then that some people don't file you away the same way. The morning it happened, I'd found out I was pregnant. I was standing in our bathroom at 6 o'clock in the morning with the test in my hand, staring at myself in the mirror and feeling something I hadn't let myself feel since the miscarriage, which was hope. Real, tentative, terrifying hope. I was 11 weeks along. I'd been waiting to tell my husband until I was sure. That morning, I decided tonight was the night. I'd make his mother's butter chicken recipe. I'd light the candles we kept for company and never used. I'd tell him we were going to be parents, and this time it would stick. I went to work. I had a good day. I bought sunflowers on the way home because they were his favorite. When I got home, Simone's car was in our driveway. That was the first wrong note. I walked in through the side door and found them both in the kitchen. My husband was standing against the counter with his arms crossed. Simone was at the table. Between them was his laptop, open to a series of screenshots. He looked at me. His face was not angry exactly. It was something worse, it was decided. "Simone showed me," he said. The screenshots were text messages between my number and Damien's spanning 4 months. The messages were explicit. They were detailed. The voice memo was 30 seconds of a woman laughing and saying she didn't feel guilty at all. The voice sounded like mine, the way a recording sounds like you when you haven't heard your own voice played back very often. I said, "That's not real." "None of that is real." Simone looked at me with something on her face. I still don't have a word for it. Pity? Maybe the kind of pity that is performing itself. My husband said, "I want you out by morning." I stood in my own kitchen with sunflowers in my hand and a baby growing that he didn't know about. And I understood in a way that was very quiet and very complete that he had already made his decision before I walked through the door. I put the sunflowers on the counter. I went upstairs, packed one bag. Practical things, documents, a sweater. I did not cry. I was too shocked to cry. Simone tried to touch my arm in the hallway. I stepped around her without speaking. My husband stood in the kitchen doorway as I left. He didn't speak. I didn't look at him. I had one person I could call. My older sister, Bridget, lived in Sudbury. She took one look at my face and said, "Okay, tonight you sleep. Tomorrow we figure it out." She did not ask me if it was true. That was the thing about Bridget. She didn't ask. I stayed in her guest room for 6 weeks. I sent my resignation to my Ottawa job and reached out to a communications agency in Sudbury. I found a 2-bedroom apartment. I blocked my husband's number. Nora Chen, as Ottawa knew her, quietly stopped existing. My daughter was born in September. Bridget was in the room with me. When they put her on my chest, I thought, this is the part that's actually mine. I named her Marin. She had my nose, my mother's forehead, and her father's eyes. The first year was the hardest and also the most peaceful of my life. Bridget's family became our village. I didn't think about Simone often. I filed her away the way you file away a version of yourself that no longer applies. What I thought about more carefully was my husband. There were nights when I thought about calling him just to say, "We made something real and you threw it away for a story someone else told you." But I never called. He tried to find me. I know this because he'd reached out to our cousin. We told her to say she hadn't been in touch. What I didn't know at the time was why he was suddenly looking. Simone and Damien had broken up. The relationship had collapsed badly. A mutual friend named Petra had always been skeptical. She knew my character. She pushed Simone until, by the end of a dinner, something cracked. Simone called my husband the next morning. She told him she'd made the screenshots. She told him about Damien manufacturing the material. She told him the voice memo was a recording of her own voice that they'd manipulated. She'd done it because she felt threatened by the fact that I was happy when her own life kept tilting sideways. My husband sat in that coffee shop and listened to the entire thing. Then he went home and understood in full what he had done. He started looking for me the next day. I'd had no contact from him in nearly 3 years. And then there was Marin, holding my hand, looking up at this stranger. I didn't speak to him that day. On the 5th day, he left an 8-page handwritten letter with my receptionist. He described Simone's confession. He wrote about hitting nothing but silence and how that silence was exactly what he deserved. Near the end, he wrote about Marin. He said he recognized something in her face that made him have to sit down on the curb afterward. He wrote, "You told me it wasn't real and I chose not to believe you. That choice belongs to me. I just need you to know I understand exactly what I threw away. I was not going to take him back. That was clear. You can forgive a person for being deceived, but you cannot rebuild trust with someone who didn't give you the chance to speak." But there was Marin. I talked to a family lawyer. We drafted an agreement, structured introductions, public places, me present. No overnights. I met him at a Tim Hortons. We talked for 2 hours. He did not defend himself. The first meeting with Marin happened in June at a park. She looked at him and said, "You're tall. Do you like ducks?" He said, "I do, actually." She took his hand and walked him toward the pond. I watched from a bench. I never reopened what we had. The door that had been shut on that February night stayed shut. Simone reached out once with a long email taking responsibility. I archived it without replying. Damien moved out west and became someone else's problem. We built a life that is small in the best way. Rooted, specific hours. The revenge I thought I wanted was for him to suffer. What I got instead was better. He lives with what he did. Simone lives with what she did. And I live in Sudbury with my daughter who loves ducks and has no one else's definition of who she gets to be. The morning I found out I was pregnant, I had sunflowers and hope. I walked out that night with one bag and thought I had lost everything. Turned out I had everything I actually needed already. I just had to drive far enough to find out. If this story made you feel something, hit the like button right now and tell me in the comments, what was the moment that hit you hardest? I read every single one.